Okay, let's get started on Chaco War. The name excited my wife. She thought it was a war about chocolate. I've decided that this was a mistake, the counter that is listed in the thing, in the sense of this is the one non-settlement entrenchment in the game. I think what happened was the rules were written maybe without realizing that that had been printed on the map along with the other fortifications and entrenchments. Maybe there had been some disagreement as to whether that should be there or not. Later scenarios just don't tell you where to put the entrenchments. They don't tell you to put them on top of the current ones or whatever. And remember, those things are permanent for the game. This is going to fall into an almost World War I-like situation in some ways, I think. Even, you know, given that it's later, and actually one of the Bolivian generals served in World War I as a colonel, I think, and should have learned some of the lessons. So there's one other thing. The guys here, this big stack which is over here, that's allowed to be spread out. I've got to think about that. First of all, I'm not sure I'm within stacking limits, so let me get that underway, and then we'll start. And we start with the supply phase. It's Paraguay's turn first. They get the first attack coming in, so they'll be able to maybe clear some space. We'll see how this all works. So even though it's the first turn of the game, we're going to have supply phase, new unit phase. There's no restrictions on that. And that kind of makes sense because most of the scenarios are sort of in the midst of the war. And yes, I made my photocopies well. So I did have to pull one unit out. I was overstacked by one. Maybe more than one. Shit. You know, this is so goofy. I'm realizing I'm not in... Oh, I'm in a settlement, so I'm allowed to have... Actually, in a city. Whatever that means. Oh, no. Those are settlement markers. I thought they'd just be docked for a settlement. Okay. So I have to worry about that. Now, I'm playing with the optional cav rules, which really kind of make cav stupid. In the sense that they're kind of useless. I'm not sure these are worth playing with in terms of annoyance. When you use mounted cav, you're going to get a movement bonus, but at lower chances of survival. What that means is they get a movement of factors of 8. Ooh. But if they're attacking and they're 50% more of the attacking force, then the combat die roll is reduced by 1, which makes sense. Cav attacking alone should be pretty crappy at this period. But then also, they always have to roll for attrition. If they're in general supply, their attrition die roll is modified by -1. Which may mean I don't want to put the cav loose, I want an infantry loose. The reason being, this is a water hex, that'll give me another -1. Okay. Oh, joy. So we open up with our supply. This is where our general headquarters is. One of our supply headings is back here. This is easily within 20 hexes. Our army commander's rating is +2. So we'll add that to our die roll. He's with his GHQ. So that's what we get. And we just roll 1 die. 6. Okay, we're going to get 4 combat supply points, 2 replacement points, and 1 new truck. And trucks are over here. I'm going to pull those out. 4 combat supply. A truck and 2 replacement points, which I can bank. And where do they go? I think they go on a supply source, but I'm not sure. And then we'll also be getting new units. I'll have to come back because I'm really just kind of working my way through these rules. I don't remember them very well. And they're very different in a few little ways, like the supply rules and stuff. Kind of chromey type stuff, most people would call it, but I think that's going to be the meat of this game, is keeping those supply lines running. So most of the supplies, they can go with a headquarters with any leader. Most of the supplies ended up here. I put one extra one here. Leads me to a question about the game that I haven't been able to figure out. These guys are marked supply only. Now the GHQ is not a leader, but the unnamed leaders I think are. And I read through the, I skimmed through the rules looking to see if they can't lead attacks or lead units into enemy zones of control. There doesn't seem to be any restriction like that, so I don't know why that says supply only there for them. Okay. I'm having trouble with these rules, in part because of this thing in the middle of them. And it's a shame it's not on the back couple pages. That's less of a disturbance, I find, than putting it right in the middle. It's fine in the middle if it's a sheet that you remove from the rule book, but it doesn't work very well when there are rules, you know, when it's part of the fold-out rules. You can't just rip it out or whatever, remove it. And of course, if you kept your rules inside the magazine, like some people do, just having an insert like that is kind of painful, but I don't know too many people who play the games and keep their rules in the magazine. All right, which brings us to the next thing, and this is why I'm complaining here, other than that I like complaining, which is the new unit phase. And I had looked that up, and now I got to flip through, because there's nowhere that I notice that tells me when the new units come in. And there we go. On the board or on the player aids. So what I'm going to get, I could take replacement points. Do I have any reduced units? I do. So let's see. Okay, so they can be in a zone of control when they receive them, and I probably want to. So I'll boost this unit. That's one of my 2 replacement points. And this unit. And that gets me back into play there. I also get my reinforcements, and I'm going to get 3 units. I had to throw that engineer I had kicking around. I hope I took it out of the cup and not off the board somewhere. And now I get 3 units that look very much the same. And they're going to show up where? I assume... friendly controlled supply source hex within stacking limits. So I got to kind of decide where I want to put them. This looks closer to the action. 2, 3. But I got to look at the movement costs. Clear is 1 for non-mech. Roads are a half. So the number of roads is the important thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. They're about the same. I'm gonna bring 2 in back here. It's back here. And 1 in over here to drive them into place. I don't think I really need these supply units to move terribly quickly at this point. And railroad has no effect. So unlike the other game, I'm not going to be able to use the Triple Alliance. I'm not going to be able to use my choo-choos. And now we're up to the movement phase. And this is going to take some serious thought on my part because of the fact that the Bolivians get a reaction movement right after my movement. I don't get a chance to attack them. They get a chance to get out of there. And I have to think about that situation very carefully as to what places I want to attack and how I want to do this. First turn of the game, probably really important choices here, given the type of situation we're looking at. So I feel like I'm just kind of blundering into the system here. I've started moving my Paraguayans. Actually, I completed moving them. I wanted to make sure I have forces at all the key locations on the board. I moved some engineers down here to start improving the fortifications there. My only engineers. Other troops moving onto the board. I shifted my truck over to this side so that it can help mobilize one of those units. I probably want to get another truck down there. I want them to be a good mobile striking force. And supply range isn't really an issue right now, so I can afford the trucks down there. Now, what I should have is a leader down there as well. I'll send him down too. The reason for that is reaction movement and just being able to interfere. So reaction movement can only happen if I have a leader. I've moved forward for 2 attacks, one over here on Toledo, which is an entrenchment, but then over here at Bocaron, there's actually a fort. And this is problematic because, who's our commander? Pena. Pena's down here. He's no good. And he's not with his general headquarters. He should probably get there because he's not terribly useful doing anything else. And at least if he's with his headquarters, he's not providing a penalty for the supply situation. I don't know where the headquarters is. I'm hoping it's up here in the front. Yeah. Because what's the other side? Out of supply. Yeah, so that they can't trace. Now, if I need to do so, I can use these depot markers and drop them in settlements that I control. And that turns them into temporary supply net. I don't actually need that right now. I've got enough supply here, I think. Let me see. 1, I could dedicate a truck. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, I'm going to need to dedicate a truck to supplies here at the GHQ so that I can throw supply all the way out here, because now it's a third of a movement point each. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And clearly I can hit everywhere else. Back here, these guys are in supply directly off of this rather than the headquarters. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep. My guess is that as I play, I'll have to count less. There's a lot of counting involved to make sure everything's right. As to the cav, it didn't have to worry. It's not. Attrition already happened. It didn't have to worry about attrition because it had water. Remember, I have to roll for every cav unit, but in this case, it was in general supply, and that gives it a +1 for the cav. So it would get a 2 or better. If it was out of water, it might take a step loss. So I'm good on that, in case you were wondering about that. But now the problem is that the Bolivians get to react. Now, they can only react, as I said, where they have leaders, and they get half movement points. So this thing, with its 5 movement allowance, Bush costs 2, I believe. 3 in rainy season, is that what the parenthesized means? Geez, I don't know. I believe so. I could only get 1 hex, or I could walk down the road or something. So I'm not going to be able to intervene with them anywhere. But over here, I can throw more troops in to help defend Bocaron. And that may mean that the Paraguayans don't attack. Now, do I want to be in a zone of control there? See, I can't move here. So this is 1, 2, 3, and that's going to eat up all my supplies. I think the best I can do is I can push forward with this dude. with my artillery and my supply and everything else. The danger? I can't leave Arca, out of command, or else, empty of troops, or else the Bolivians will lose that, and that's an important fortified location. I'm not too worried about Alajuta. That's just victory points, and you could say, well, victory points are what you want to win the game. Yeah, but one nice thing, I don't have the magazine right here, I'm reading it elsewhere. Command magazine comes with a D-elim. This sort of, for the games that you're playing, a description of what some basic strategies and tactics within the game that you should follow, and what the design. There's also designer's notes in there, which is a very helpful thing. I love looking at stuff like that. The designer's notes worried me about other Command magazine games in terms of them being too simplistic, because they say, oh, the supply system in this is a lot more complex than we generally like, but it's a compromise. Oh, by the way, as to map graphics, I put little stars here next to the important cities that are going to be doubled in terms of their victory point value, just because I don't think they're major goals, but I'm never going to remember them if I don't put them. So they turn out to be here, here, down here, and here. And those stars are just on little post-it notes. So I didn't actually mark the map. I figured, you know, if I actually wrote on the map, I wouldn't be disturbed by that. I've done that before, but I wouldn't particularly be able to see those locations. I don't know how important they are, but they seem to me to be major, you know, somewhat more important goals. Although one of the things they talk about is, and that's what I was trying to get to when I was speaking, is that you don't really want to be going for victory points unless you're close to the 50 or the other guy's close to the 50. What you want to be doing is you want to be eliminating the other guy's army. And that makes sense, you know. That would be the case even if victory points were important. But we're not in some kind of situation where you can get an automatic victory easily or anything like that. So, what I think I'm going to do, what I don't want to give up is the fortification. What I think I'm going to do is I'm going to take Peñar and drive him into the bush with an artillery and an infantry to defend it. That's important because the artillery is going to be able to provide some bombardment support. I can't get through this zone of control. Those are locking, and I couldn't go 1, 2, 3 because I'd have used up, well, 2.5. I'd use up my movement points getting into the bush here and not being able to push through. There was really no way for me to help defend that town. So the reaction movement is not as bold as one might think from like Desert Fox or something like that. This is not a blitzkrieg type of game. I could react with these guys. That may not be a bad idea, except they're in a nice place for supply right now, and moving a couple hexes down to here, you know, I can't really afford to lose this fortification location. So I don't think I'm going to be able to bring troops up there. All right. So that's going to be to my first combat phase. Now, I gotta take a little break to look at bombardment and how that interacts. I think it happens at the same time as combat, but what I'm not sure of is whether the Bolivians get to bombard this hex from a different hex than the ones that's being attacked. They will get to during their combat phase, which comes after the Paraguayan one. Yes, I'm allowed to barrage in both phases. So what's gonna happen is first the attacker, Estig here, shit. I'm really clumsy doing this kind of stuff with one hand. He has 2 artillery in here. I'm not going to use the supply here, I don't believe. I want to keep a supply with me so I don't get cut off. So I'm going to fire off 2 supply units for the artillery. Ooh, that's expensive, no? And that gets me a 2-point barrage. You know, I was kind of hoping on reducing the strength of the defenses because I don't have a great attack, but I'm going to bombard Peñar's force instead because he doesn't have the defensive advantage of the fortifications. So I've got 2 artillery units barraging. On a 1 or a 2, I'm going to cause a step loss. And I do. And he'll take that off his infantry. And he is allowed to barrage back, which he will do. And he's only got a 1, which means he only hits on a 1. If he were attacking a fortified location, it would have no chance. And he succeeds, so I gotta pick a unit that I want to take as a casualty. Now, I could take the artillery. I'm gonna have to count my numbers to see what I want to do there. So looking at the counters, I actually wouldn't even be able to get a good attack at all if I didn't take it on the artillery. I kind of don't want to take it on the artillery because they have this added benefit. All right, now we go to the actual attacks, and let's take a look. Let's see how we do here. Let's take a look at what we do here. We have 6, 10. And I'll blow a supply for the attack. That's 10. Oh no, I hope I didn't screw up. These guys only have 3, so that would be 3 to 1, but am I even in supply? I'd have to trace back to here. My supply range is 6 right now, so 2, 4, 6, yes I can. So he's going to take his 3. So we have a 3 to 1 attack. Oh, no, we don't. We have a 10 to 6. That's doubled because of the fortification. 10 to 6. That's a 1 to 1 attack. That does not sound good. I have a +1 for leadership. There's a -1, I believe, for the bush. So this is not a great roll. And we get a lousy 1, which is a 50% retreat and a 10% loss to the defender. Okay. I don't like these kind of combat tables in terms of the effort required, but I also have to look up just how that 50% is allocated. If you remember, in some game, well, in one of the games I last had, 50% meant you reduce, you flip steps out of things, and that counts as losses. In this case, I think it's out of the strength. So I think I'm going to have to lose 50% of my strength there. And that would be 5 strength points. So I'm going to drop the steps on each of these. However, these guys take a 10% loss. They are dead. That's if I understand things correctly. So they go into here because they haven't gotten a chance. Unfortunately, I have a retreat or rout. The command rating of the leader is +1. These are Paraguayans, so they're more likely to just retreat than rout. So I'm guaranteed a retreat, and let me make sure I'm right about those percentage losses. Yeah, you have to lose the combat strength points. 1 hex away from the enemy unit. The hex may not be. Units unable to retreat take a step loss instead. So I have not gained anything, even if I destroyed their unit. And now I have to figure out if I want to make this attack, because this is a fortress. They've got 12 strength points. I don't think I have enough strength to take that on, actually. I think I've got another 1 to 1 attack, but I've got a good leader here. Go for it, because it forces the Paraguayans to make, the Bolivians to make a hard choice between burning supply or losing units. Now they're going to burn supply, there's no question, but it ends up as a 16 to 4 attack. I don't know if I want to burn the supply that I have with me or if I want to burn another one. I have to think about that. Okay. I'm sorry. 16 to 12 attack. If I said 4. I net +1, though, from my leadership bonus versus his terrain advantage, which still is not good for me, but, you know, I'm trying to attack a location. Now, here's the problem here. I had to leave a fortification of my own, but I'm going to get another movement phase, I think, which allows me to capture stuff. Ooh, I roll nice. That's a 7 net. That means we each lose 25%. Now 25% of this is just going to flip it. I have to do some quick calculations. That's going to be 4 strength points, but I don't know how to create 4 strength points. I probably don't want to eliminate units because those come back more slowly than my replacements, I think, can be taken. Plus I can use damaged units as garrison units. I've been finding it's hard to garrison places. My mistake. Now we go to a Bolivian reaction combat and then a second combat phase, so I can keep pounding on something. But I don't get a movement phase. There's no breakthroughs. There's nothing like that in this game. Ouch. It's the Bolivians' choice to launch an attack, and they have these 2 units here. Not a lot of strength. I've got 6 strength points. I don't believe I'm going to launch one with that kind of power. But of note, I can trace my supply back to here. Remember, there's a 6-point movement allowance. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'd be in supply there. Plus, I have my truck dedicated to the supply. Something I decided after I started playing. But, you know, there's things that I allow myself to cheat with when I'm learning a game. So I would be in supply, but Estig's also in supply here. Do I want to just bombard? I have my artillery. I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to expend one of these supply points, and I got to get a 2-pointer in there. The counters are kind of a pain in the ass. I don't like... The map's a little poochy, and the counters are slickery. The slick counters tend to fall over. I never liked when the glossies came out, but... Okay, so we're going to take another shot with the bombardment. I don't know if Estic's going to reply. He doesn't really have artillery. He has 1 point of artillery coming back. He could do some damage to this hex or to this hex. But that doesn't seem effective to me. I want to make an attack so that I get the chance to advance. So I'm going to hold off on the barrage, but the other side is firing and they do not get it. Now we get to the Paraguayans again, and they can't launch an attack here, but they can launch one again here. So let me see what those numbers look like. They should be pretty good. That's 6. Shit. To 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Still don't get 2 to 1. Shit. Alright, I'll come back after I fix my mess. So, some of the slickeriness of the counters, the gloss on them. Part of the problem with that is some of the counters are facing one way, some are facing the other. I'm going to make this 1-to-1 attack, but I may not want to commit all my forces. If I count on him having 6, and he did expend his supply for that, I want to make sure that I only have 6 or so in there. So I'm going to throw... See, the problem is if I get 50%, I'm going to lose a big unit if I'm taking 7 hits. That's troubling. On the other hand, 25% is more likely. I'm not going to get a 50% because I'm not big enough. So 25% is what I can guarantee. So what I want to do is I want to figure out how many points of attack I need to send in here for that 25% loss that I'm guaranteed to get. So 25% loss of what? Well, and this is annoying. So I've got 11 points. 25% of 11 is going to be 4. Well, what do I have here? This is obnoxious decision making. That's not good. 25% of what equals 3? Well, that sounds like 12. Wait a minute. All right. So I think sending the whole force in is okay, but I think sending 6 in is okay too. 7, 25% of 7 is 2. Yeah, I'm okay with that. So I'm just going to attack with 7 strength. But it doesn't make a difference. I know what I'm losing. I'm losing a step off my big unit. I've spent all my ammo that I'm going to spend. The question... He had another point. You know what? He's going to bombard beforehand again. I'll spend another ammo if I need to. Okay, that was a miss. Because I might have been able to kill something. Alright. So now I'm on the 1-to-1 with a +1 to the die roll still for my leadership. I get a crappy 2, which means I take 25% in a retreat. He takes 10% though, which is again his unit. And that goes over in the dead pile. It won't be back for a while until the reinforcement cup is completely exhausted. But I take my 3-point loss and I have to retreat. Now, if I had not moved my engineer, if he had been on his constructing side, he'd finish his construction, and we go to the political phase. We do not have to remove, we don't particularly want to remove any leaders. We don't have to remove our army commander, do we? Yeah, he did not take a 50% or E result on his attacks. So there's basically no reason to remove Estig. He's the best leader I think the Paraguayans have, as opposed to the Bolivians, who have kind of a lousy starting leader. And then political value of other leaders is higher. So this is the guy who kind of engineered the war, is likely to end up in charge, and he ends up becoming president for it and then overthrown by a coup. You know, South America was such a mess, and still it's stabilized a great deal recently, but you know, it's still kind of messy. Shit, my power did not charge. I got a problem there. I was gonna play, but I don't think I can. I don't want to be on a tether, but I'll start the turn anyhow. So for the Bolivians, it's their turn. They get their supply phase at this point. Shit. This damn camera's so busted, but I'm too cheap to buy another one. And, you know, it's not really the money. It's not. I was thinking, oh, I could make money from you guys for a camera. It's not really that. It's just I'm unwilling to replace things until they are destroyed. Okay. So, our headquarters is down here, our general headquarters. And I counted it out, and it's 40 hexes or less between these, which is the second column in the chart. Now, the problem here is it's not road hexes. I would have expected it to be road hexes. No, it's just general size. It's figured, you know, I got a river down here. I got all kinds of different ways to translate the supply. I'm kind of bothered by it just because outside of being isolated, there's nothing that increases the cost. I feel like it should be primary road hexes or something like that, or some kind of restriction on it, but there's not. Probably just simplification. Now the modifiers, my command rating is not a minus. I think there are some with minuses, actually. Yep, there's one right there, Bones or whatever. He's really lousy. He's not stacked with his GHQ, so we have a total of -1 on the die roll, which can't be good. And we get a 4. Now you can see Bolivia gets better supplies, even though they can't reach as far. So that's 3 combat points, 3 replacement points, and a truck. I will allocate these. Oh, you know what I forgot to use? I forgot to use my planes. Of course, they're only usable once per game turn, but both sides could have used them. Oops. Okay. And I also get, I think it's 2 combat units. Picked at random from my cup. And that's what I'll get. 1 good cav, but of course cav is iffy in this game. And regular infantry unit. And I gotta set them up and figure out how I'm gonna transport some of this stuff down the space. Funny, this cav has a movement of 5, probably because it's a bigger unit, but cav is going to have movement of 8 in all cases. Okay, the Bolivians have largely moved their forces. Biggest decision was whether or not to move into this hex here. I couldn't get enough forces to defend Toledo. Corrales is open. I've got a lot of problems here in terms of having enough troops. Basically, I have, 1 regular combat unit in each hex that I'm defending. So some of these, entrenchments that I have, they're just not, I'm not able to defend them yet, and I think Paraguay is going to be able to take advantage of that to some extent. They can't take too much of an advantage of it. I've got no supply up here, which is problematic. Do I have more than 1 anywhere? I'm looking here more for combat supply, make sure that I have some anywhere. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to get that into range, into a location where supply would be helpful. Also, the forces moving down here are somewhat problematic. I have to think about their supply for next turn. Now, I was actually able to bring units in at Villamontes. I didn't realize that's a supply source for them. So I can trace from there 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I can push that out 6, 7, 8 to here. That doesn't get me to here. But here's the thing. I'm allowed to use these depots. So I can, throw this supply depot down when it's my attrition check, and that'll supply everything in this area that's in range of this. So I don't actually, I have some capability, some significant flexibility towards the general supply that might not seem obvious. Now comes the question of what Paraguay wants to do. They want to set themselves up for their next turn attack. Bolivia's done moving. You want to be in defensive locations at the end of your turn, but it's not that vital to be in them at the end of the opponent's turn. You just want to make sure of supply. So now I have to decide where I want to position myself and what attacks I want to make next turn. It doesn't really matter too much what reinforcements I'm going to get. They're going to come in far enough back that it's not really an issue. So, shit, there goes that. One of the things I noticed, starting supply radius up here for Bolivia is at 6. However, it's not actually listed for the Paraguayans, and there should be at 8, because that's based off of the supply table. I still haven't figured out what I'm looking at, but I'm within 20, so I have an 8 hex supply range, or an 8 movement point supply range, not a 20 movement, or not a 6 movement point range, which is kind of cool. That gives me a little bit more flexibility. The further your lines are stretched, the harder it is to run your supplies up. Overall, your net becomes more stretched in general. But honestly, the supply lines, the general supply looks like it's pretty easy to maintain no matter what. And I was set up without sufficient forces under Franco or Estic to, and Estic's not his full name, to launch attacks. So I moved up in this case to take the position. I'm not sure why that's important, but that kind of forces my hand with forces from both of these places. Trying to take Corrales, I'd be out of supply moving up there. I don't want to be making attrition rolls when I don't have to. You can only place those depots along your line of communication. So it's very helpful for Bolivia right now running, down this road. So I can, temporarily say, yeah, there's a supplies depot there that we can draw off of and cluster some forces off of. It's not something that's useful in terms of keeping your combat units in supply in the front line usually, because your GHQ is the terminus of your supply line. I think I'm going to put another turn in here before I load this one up, just to keep from doing short videos, but that gets us up to October. And I just don't really see anything that Paraguay can do here. I could bombard. Do I have artillery here? I do not. I could have moved these guys up and bombarded, but the artillery's weakened. I'd rather not play that game. Burning a supply. No, there's no chance of bombarding the fortress, actually, with my weakened artillery. So, because I'd only have one there. And that's actually a +2, so I had no chance of a bombardment working there. I did have one when they moved up into here to bombard me. I chose not to move this guy forward. I don't see too many places that he would be of use. I could push against this, but that's not terribly well defended. The artillery doesn't count, so it's only 4 strength points. Doubled is 8, though. So it's tough moving in this game. Pushing the front, you're not going to see blitzkrieg-like actions in this. Right, after the initial failures in trying to do too much at once, I've concentrated Estic and what's his actual name there? Garibia. I don't know. I can't read it upside down, but I've concentrated on an attack on Toledo here. And Bolivia can do reaction movement, but they're not really poised to launch any attacks with the forces that they have. And I don't even have a commander here. I'm not in range to support this in any sense of the word. I want to make sure Peña stays here, so I'm not going to use him to shift forces about. So we have a fight down here, which is going to work out. I don't know what to. But I'll remember to throw the airplanes in. Both sides are basically going to pitch in an airplane, so they neutralize out. But after the first round of combat, the second round means that there will be an opportunity for Bolivia to get a shift in their favor because of their air superiority. Okay, and that was successful after 2 rounds of combat. The second round, Bolivia didn't have any supplies, so they were halved and doubled for the terrain, and I put this in. I noticed I've been forgetting to worry about my killed units, which are worth a victory point each. So that's 1, 2, 3 victory points, and then I've got to worry about the victory point for the city or town. So I captured this during combat, so what I'm going to get is what? 1 die of additional morale or victory points. And that's just 2 victory points for that. Well, it's not seen as terribly important. Now, what's kind of cool, victory points are something that just pretty much accumulate. You can lose them for certain things. For example, this leader being displaced would have lost victory points, except he only has a political rating of 0, which means, I believe, No, it's only named leaders displacing who are a problem. Some of the unnamed leaders, I believe, had political value. Maybe I'm mistaken. I thought I saw some with it, but I'm assuming that's incorrect. Okay, I had thought that there was some on the unnameds. So you can spend them on certain things though, like additional call-ups of reinforcements and the leader promotions, which, as long as you're not net falling too far behind, are okay. As long as you give yourself some padding, you're not going to lose many, because there's not much you lose victory points for in this game. Generally, there's something that just increment to you as you're going. The only exception there is the leader displacements, I believe, and forced leader replacement as well. So now we'll move on to the Bolivian turn, and I believe these stay used for the turn. I think they remain used for the entirety of the turn. I'll have to look that up. One thing, I completed construction here. It's hard to disrupt that because you do it at the start of your turn and you complete it in the other person's. And these damn counters are just a royal pain in the ass. You know what? They remind me of the TSR era components for S&T magazines. Slippery counters, maybe a little too indented on the back, and the convex surface on the front, that if they're on different sides and everything, they just make for this horrible mess. The poochy little bits of the map, everything, it's really causing problems. This also is a number crunching game in an annoying sort of way, where you have to count up all the factors and all the units, multiply, divide, da-da-da, and then when you, which is pretty standard for CRT-based games, but then when you deal with this CRT with the percentages, it's just a hassle. It's the kind of thing that I wish wasn't there, because it's too annoying. I understand the advantages to gaining something like that, but, you know, I prefer firepower tables, which can be just as annoying. If you think about how Europa Universalis, if you watched that, how I played out that, where I had to keep little pieces of paper keeping track of everything. I'm sure if I did that here, it would work just as well, but I'm getting more detail out of those kind of firepower tables than I do off of a standard combat result table. And here, yes, I'm getting somewhere in between the detail, but it's just an obnoxious sort of thing, because I have to keep recalculating. I feel like I should pull my calculators out to keep the two numbers on them at all times, like I do on more complex games. Usually larger games that have more complex combat systems. But, you know, this one seems to require it. So the Bolivians try to throw back another line here at Corrales, another fortified location, and we're going to try to build fortifications here at El Cruce. Now, we got a problem, which is that if this side kind of falls, there's a risk of that whole section being available to pivot and attack from it, to cut off and pocket the Bolivian army. And that would be a very terrible thing. So if I can't hold this kind of line right now, the war is going to expand into a broader front in a dangerous sort of way, or else I have to fall back and defend along the roadways again. The roadways are absolutely vital. You know, again, you can run your supply without those roads, but you can't get your stuff moving at all quickly without the roads. The expense for the terrain, if you look at it clear, costs 1 for non-mech, 2 for mechs, which means your trucks are going to be useless without the roads. And then if you start looking at brush, that's 2 points anyway to move through, whereas the roads are at a half and a third. Most of this is that brush type terrain. There's a few places where there's clearings, so you've got really an ugly situation. Now, with this positioning, we have an interesting situation, which is that we can look through and see, there's a defense here of 12. I probably can't crack that with what Franco's got with him. His stuff's still beaten up from earlier. However, Estic here might be able to take Corrales. Corrales has a defense strength of 8. Estic has 17 combat strength points stacked with him. He can't pick stuff up on the way, but he can walk through to here at 1. This will be a clear attack because of that hex there. That's all pretty positive. Of course, the Bolivians do have supply in place now. They got their supply roll, so they got to refurbish the supply in these 2 areas that have been under combat. But I think that's a good move at this point to just fling up here. Certainly to move there, but even to launch the attack. Now, the Bolivians do have an air unit which they'll throw in. So we're looking at 2 to 1. With just a -1 due to the air unit. The terrain doesn't help here. I've got +2 for my attack leader. So it ends up at +1 overall in the roll, which is only a 3. We're just going to take 25% losses. But that helps me in the attritioning of this space. And that's kind of how you take things in this. You hit them multiple times. Paraguay continuing their assault here at Corrales now. They've put quite a bit of force here. That means the Bolivian response is kind of interesting. Bolivia could, of course, launch a counterattack, but that doesn't seem terribly advantageous with the limited forces I have in hand. But what I think I'm going to do is use my reaction movement to start pulling out. I don't think I can hold a front line up there. And given that preservation of force seems to be an important factor in the game. Get these trucks out of here and over here. I want to make damn sure that I don't get cut off down here. Are there important things? Yeah. Bogaran especially is important because it's a fortress, as is Savareda here. But I just don't know that I have enough strength to cover everything. So if I start my withdrawal now, I can always reverse that because Paraguay doesn't get another attempt to move before I get an attempt to move, or a chance to move. So I think that's what I'm going to do. And these guys down here at Corrales look in hopeless shape, trying to hold the line there. Not a lot of replacement points came through for Paraguay this time. They only got 1 point, which meant they replaced their big 10-point unit. They boosted that up, so that'll be available for the attack. But otherwise, not a lot. They're funneling forces into these areas and then forward into their main line thrust of attack. So that was an easily successful attack. I attacked on the 6 to 1 table. +1 ended up getting a good enough result that I didn't take any losses. I didn't commit everything. Only 12 strength points were necessary because Bolivia refused to supply their forces with combat supply. I spent 1 to reduce the amount of strength points at risk, essentially. Now, Bolivia has pulled back. They gave up Bogaran here and basically pulled back to a little quadrilateral thing here. And I have this location. Since there's no road cutting up this way, it's okay that I've lost Corrales in a sense. But here's the problem. These guys are in a rough supply situation. If this road gets cut, which it is right now, actually, I may have had to make a roll. I think I could trace my supply line through here. So let's see if I could be in supply. Yeah, that's not going to work. If I had a truck there, it would have worked, but I don't have one there. And there really is no alternative. I can't put a depot here because it's not on my supply, my mainline route of supply. So I kind of want to move my army headquarters away from where it is. Let me rethink that. But regardless, I had to make a supply check here. Now I've got water, and I could spend an airplane to give myself another bonus. That gives me -2 on the attrition table. Only for 1 unit though, or a +1. So one unit's safe, the other, the weaker unit, has to make a die roll. And they're okay too. They only fail on a 1. So I kind of want to move my supply line back. It's fairly easy for me to run supplies up to here, especially if I'm building some entrenchments there on that crossroads, which I am. The danger with that entrenchment, though, is the Paraguay could attack there. Now, I've thrown a lot of defensive force in there. The artillery is not really very helpful, although if I leave some supply back here, I can trace that. And, you know, if I leave a pool of supply nearby, I'm in good shape. So I want to fall back with my headquarters, though, and I'm going to do that before I make any decisions. I don't think Paraguay is going to be able to launch a serious attack against this. They may be able to launch an attack here. This isn't going to be able to move far enough. They only get half their movement. I've got a bunch of cav, though, which could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's not going to get me there. I only have 4 movement points. Such is life. Here's the end result. I kind of should have considered maybe pulling out of here. This isn't really in a lot of danger. It's so hard to move through this crap that there aren't going to be these long-range raids, even if there aren't zones of control to stop anything. The Paraguayans moved into place here, but they're not going to attack. They're looking at a 1-to-1 attack. There's supplies in there. They'd rather surround it and besiege it. I've got supply running down this way. I was careful to count my situation because I have a headquarters here. I'm in supply running through, even if it would only get me to here. But I think I have a dedicated truck there, or a truck there. I may have pulled them all. Yeah, I got a dedicated truck there, so I'm okay in terms of that. I pushed forward and took Bocaron, though, and that's important because unlike the normal cities, I took this during a movement phase, which means I'll get a die doubled and added to the victory point total. Yeah, it was only 2 points. It could have been a pretty major thing that kind of forced the Bolivians to fight a little harder. But luckily, you know, the press was willing to, and the population and the army and whatever was willing to accept that. Bolivia also managed to fortify this space. Just entrenchments. Nothing major, but I think that's going to be important. I may have to give up this line as well. You know, the problem is I kind of want to hold at least this fortress before I fall back here, but it tightens up my line. You know, I would have loved to keep this, but I just didn't feel like I had the forces at hand to do so. I'm getting close to having enough forces that I can hold the line, and that pushes us into the rainy season. Not quite the end of 32, but I think we're going to send this one up.